Emily, is Grandpa behaving himself?
Oh, yes. Well, kind of.
Injuring his leg, old people can be such a nuisance. I wish they'd think about those of us who have to take care of them. Patricia, that's not a nice way to say it.
It's fine. He's already declining quite a bit.
I can't handle the fuss of old people.
But you're used to it, so you'll be fine. The other day, my husband's grandfather, Michael, fell in the garden and injured his leg. It's not a serious injury, but he's already 82 years old. Because of his age, we're having him rest in bed just to be safe, so it doesn't get worse. My mother-in-law won't even go near him, let alone take care of him. I'm Emily, 30 years old. I married 3 years ago and live with my husband Daniel's family. My husband was my boss at the company where I worked, a company founded by his grandfather. When I joined 8 years ago, my father-in-law was already the president, and my grandfather-in-law was the chairman. But back then, the grandfather was still handling all the important tasks and responsibilities of the company. 2 years ago, when Grandpa turned 80, he remained chairman but handed over most of the public duties to my father-in-law.
Michael, you've worked hard all this time. Now leave the company matters to Christopher and take it easy.
My mother-in-law said with a smile, but her words sounded sarcastic to me. Grandfather-in-law is a bit stubborn but a fair and kind person with a good reputation. In contrast, my father-in-law seems somewhat immature, never expressing his opinions clearly, and utterly unreliable compared to Grandpa. And he always does whatever my mother-in-law says. My grandmother-in-law has already passed away, and I never met her. My husband and I started dating when we worked together on the same product planning team 3 years after I joined the company. My husband, who was energetically leading the team, seemed reliable to me, though a bit self-righteous. Maybe I felt that way because I lost my father early and grew up with just my mother. My mother also passed away from illness 2 years ago, and now I have no family other than my in-laws. Shortly after I got married, my mother fell ill and needed care. So I quit my job to take care of her. The fact that my husband's family didn't object was probably due to a single comment from Grandpa. It's only natural to take care of the mother who raised you alone. Don't worry and take good care of her. Thanks to that, I was able to be by my mother's side every day for a year without financial worries until she passed away. My mother-in-law seemed a bit dissatisfied, but I was truly grateful. However, since Grandpa handed over the company to my father-in-law, everyone's attitude towards him has gradually changed. They no longer listen to his opinions as much. And I can't shake the feeling that they're treating him carelessly. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but watching my mother-in-law and husband's behavior, I can't help but feel that way. My father-in-law's attitude is non-committal. But it feels like he's ignoring Grandpa, as if he's no longer needed since he's practically retired. Watching my in-laws' behavior, I feel somewhat angry.
Hey, don't you think your attitude, Patricia, and yours too, is a bit cold towards Grandpa?
So, what's the big deal?
Grandpa tries to talk to you, and you barely respond. You don't even try to help him.
Like I have time to deal with old people. You can take care of Grandpa. You're the one with free time.
You don't have to talk like that.
Quiet. I'm tired from work. Don't nag me about unnecessary things. This is how it goes. No matter what I say, they won't listen to me. My grandfather-in-law doesn't say anything to his family about this. Now, I'm the only one who talks to my grandfather-in-law at home.
Grandpa, the weather is nice today. Shall we go for a little walk outside? Your leg seems to be healing well, and I think it will be good rehabilitation.
Thank you. Let's go out for a bit then. When the two of us went to the park, there were several families with children playing around. My grandfather-in-law looked at the scene with joy.
Christopher and Daniel had times like that too.
Grandpa? I was busy with work and couldn't take care of the children much. Maybe that's why I couldn't raise Christopher and Daniel properly. My grandfather-in-law said with a slightly sad face, almost like he was talking to himself. Christopher is my father-in-law, and Daniel is my husband. I think about how everyone can be kinder to my grandfather-in-law, but I can't come up with a good idea. But then, my in-laws suggested building a house for my grandfather-in-law. This house is over 50 years old, right? The layout is bad, it's hard to use, and instead of spending money on repairs, it would be better to build a new house in a more convenient location.
A new house?
Michael is getting older, and it's good that he only got injured last time, but we never know what will happen. So, let's make the house barrier-free so we won't have trouble if care is needed.
I see.
We can even put Michael's room in the middle so everyone can take care of him easily.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Right. So, it's settled then? And Michael, about the cost.
If it's a house for all of us, I'll take care of it. Talk to Mr. Jones about the money.
Typical Michael. Thank you. We appreciate it.
My mother-in-law smiled happily. It seems to me that they only flatter him when they want money. But if everyone takes care of my grandfather-in-law after moving to the new house, I thought there could be nothing better. Mr. Jones is the company's in-house counsel and also manages my grandfather-in-law's personal assets. My grandfather-in-law liked his character and made him in-house counsel, and it's been nearly 30 years. He's 58 now and the person my grandfather-in-law trusts the most. I've met him several times, and he seems to be a very honest person. He always cares about my grandfather-in-law's health, and sometimes I think he's more like a son than his real sons. Having such people around my grandfather-in-law makes me feel a little relieved. I wasn't informed about where or what kind of house was being built. But my mother-in-law seemed very cheerful, and the three of them were looking at interior design magazines and discussing various things. So it seemed to be going smoothly. Then something unexpected happened. It was revealed that my grandfather-in-law had a debt of $1,820,000.
Wait, what's this about $1,820,000?
My grandfather-in-law had become a co-signer for a loan for a friend's company. But that company was in trouble, and the debt had become my grandfather-in-law's responsibility.
Wait, they're not going to take the house that's under construction, are they?
Since the contract has already been completed, and as Patricia said, it's in the president's name, so it's fine. My mother-in-law seemed relieved at those words.
Oh, thank goodness. I'm glad we did it my way.
Listening to that conversation, I learned for the first time that the house was in my father-in-law's name. Even though my grandfather-in-law had paid for it, putting it in my father-in-law's name seemed just like something my mother-in-law would do. I also wondered why they didn't think of giving up the house to help repay the debt.
Hey, this debt is Michael's fault, and it has nothing to do with us or the company, right?
Well, it was signed in Michael's name.
Oh, good. Then there's no problem.
I couldn't understand what was good about it. But since my grandfather-in-law didn't say anything during that conversation, I didn't intervene either. After all, it's not an amount I could handle. And a few days later, my grandfather-in-law's behavior began to change gradually. Grandpa, what would you like for lunch?
Who are you calling Grandpa? I'm only 50. You have no right to call me that. Huh?
Sorry. Emily, right? I was lost in thought. At first, I thought he was just deep in thought, But when it happened repeatedly, I began to feel uneasy.
Patricia, what are you doing? Where's my meal?
Grandpa, I'm Emily. Patricia is your daughter-in-law. You ate your meal earlier.
I didn't eat. Are you trying to starve me?
I wondered if my grandfather-in-law's condition was triggered by the $1,820,000 debt. And seeing that none of his family members were trying to help him might have been a double shock. What can I do for him? I tried to take my grandfather-in-law to the hospital, but he refused to go. He might not want to admit that he might have dementia. I don't want to force him, but I can't do anything on my own. I consulted my husband, but he only replied that it had nothing to do with him. I can't rely on my mother-in-law either. So I thought my father-in-law was the only option.
Yeah, I heard from Patricia and Daniel.
They think it might be dementia? Can you go to the hospital with us?
But it's not that bad yet, right? If we go to the hospital, others will find out. My father having dementia.
There are good medications now that can slow the progression.
Well, there's no need to rush. Let's watch him a little longer. Emily is here, so it'll be fine, right?
I can't help but think how unreliable these people are. I can't depend on them. Grandpa, let's go to the hospital. Let's get you properly examined.
Who are you? Where are you planning to take me? You're up to no good.
I almost cry thinking about how my once kind grandfather-in-law has become so stubborn. But my mother-in-law just laughs, amused.
Even if he was the chairman, it's over for him now. But now everything, even the company, is all Christopher's. Patricia, Grandpa isn't completely unaware. He's listening to everything. He'll forget everything soon. He'll start wandering, dribbling. Just thinking about it gives me chills. He's nothing but a nuisance now. How can you say that? Grandpa has worked hard for the family all his life.
My mother-in-law's words make me angry and sad. But my grandfather-in-law just smiles.
See? This old man doesn't understand anything. Patricia!
I'm furious at my mother-in-law's laughing and words. But soon, the new house will be ready. Things might change once we move there. Since it's a house that Grandpa built, the family might show some gratitude and be kind to him. I couldn't completely abandon that faint hope. And 2 months later, the house was finally built. For days, I had been forced to pack my in-laws' and husband's belongings, while my father-in-law's and my things were mostly untouched. Even when I tried to pack my things, my in-laws and husband kept giving me tasks, so I couldn't make any progress. But I thought it would be fine to move the small things later since this house wasn't going away. On moving day, after moving most of the things, I went to call my father-in-law, but my husband said, "Ah, you and Grandpa can stay here."
What?
You can stay in this house.
We don't need any extra baggage in the new house.
In other words, you and Grandpa will live here from now on. And I'll give you Grandpa's debt too. Well, you can at least be a housekeeper.
Hey, let's go. Yeah, I'm coming. Good luck with the debt repayment and live in care.
With those words, my in-laws cheerfully got into the car and left. I was stunned for a while. I couldn't immediately understand what had just happened. Were we just abandoned? And not just me, but my grandfather-in-law too. Only they would live in the new house. It took me a while to understand because it was beyond my imagination that someone could do something so cruel. How should I explain this to my grandfather-in-law? I slowly returned to the back room. I don't mind taking care of my grandfather-in-law at all. That was my intention from the start. As I was about to timidly call out to him, who was sitting with his back to me, He seemed to sense my presence and turned around before I could speak. "Have they gone already?" My grandfather-in-law's expression as he said that looked completely different from the dazed look he had just moments ago. To be frank, he seemed like a different person. I thought maybe a different symptom had emerged. But the next moment, my grandfather-in-law smiled. And then, his following words surprised me. As I was talking to my grandfather-in-law, Mr. Jones came. "Chairman, have you finished getting rid of the unnecessary staff?"
"Yes, it's all done. Let's go, shall we?" Where are we going?" "Of course, to the new house."
I left the house where I had been living, led by my grandfather-in-law, without understanding what was happening. The next month, countless calls came from my mother-in-law and husband. My grandfather-in-law said he wouldn't deal with them anymore, but I answered my husband's call because of the divorce.
"Hey, Emily! Is Grandpa with you? When I went to the old house, it was for sale. It's not worth $1,820,000, so you can't repay the debt." "Is that why you did that?"
"What do you mean?"
"Put Grandpa on. Dad said he can't get in touch at all. That forgetful old man has done something outrageous."
I knew what he was talking about, but I wanted to hear what my husband would say.
"Grandpa sold the company's stocks to the executive director. Thanks to that, the executive director became the largest shareholder, and a shareholders' meeting and board meeting were held. And Dad was dismissed as president."
"But the executive director is well liked, and maybe Grandpa thought he was better to hand over the company to?"
"The executive director must have deceived the senile old man into selling the stocks. This is invalid."
"You seem to be misunderstanding something, but Grandpa doesn't have dementia. If anything, he seems more coherent than before."
"What?"
I too, until that moving day, had seriously thought that my grandfather-in-law had dementia. It seems that my grandfather-in-law had been suspicious from the time my mother-in-law said she would build a house to live with him. So he devised a plan. He pretended to have dementia to see how my in-laws and husband would react. As expected, they showed their true colors one after another. In the end, they left my grandfather-in-law and me behind. I struggled to hold back my laughter because everything went exactly as I expected. My grandfather-in-law said. I was surprised, relieved, and a little conflicted.
"To deceive the enemy, you must first deceive your allies."
He laughed. He seemed to have been getting regular updates on the company from the executive director and Mr. Jones. With my grandfather-in-law gone, my father-in-law and husband did as they pleased. Self-righteous, completely ignoring the opinions of the employees. Constant entertaining at the company's expense. He had handed over the company to my father-in-law, but he was worried about the future, so he took this measure. In the end, he decided he couldn't entrust it to his son and left it to the executive director.
"What about the $1,820,000 debt?"
"That's gone now." Indeed, my grandfather-in-law had been a guarantor for a friend's debt. But he also owned personal assets that exceeded that. After stepping back from the company's operations, he had invested in real estate and made a considerable profit. So there was no problem at all, but if I had said that, it was clear that my mother-in-law and husband would target it. That's why I only talked about the debt. The friend was the son of a benefactor who had helped my father-in-law when he was young. Moreover, since then, the countryside land that the son owned was going to be developed into a resort. And he was able to sell it at a high price, so there was no need to take on the debt.
"You're kidding!"
But more importantly, are you guys okay?
"We're not okay. Both my father and I were denounced by the company. What should we do now?"
Well, there's also the mortgage on the house.
What? What do you mean, the mortgage on the house?
Huh? You haven't realized it yet?
The house money should have been all paid by Grandpa.
Maybe you don't remember what Grandpa said at that time? When my mother-in-law talked to my grandfather-in-law about money, he had set the condition that if it's a house where everyone, including me, will live. In other words, if that wasn't the case, he wouldn't pay. Even if the house was in my father-in-law's name, my grandfather-in-law intended to pay if everyone was living together.
That's just because you assumed Grandpa would pay and didn't look at the documents properly, right?
Christopher signing without checking everything. It shows he really didn't have the qualities of a president.
You're kidding!
Afterward, my parents-in-law ended up losing the house they had built because they couldn't pay the mortgage. Now they live in an old apartment over 50 years old and are struggling to pay off the unpaid loan. My mother-in-law and husband have been contacting me alternately, saying we should all live together, but that's impossible now. My grandfather-in-law has retired from his chairman position, and now he has bought an old house in the countryside, and we are living together.
Emily, you can go and live wherever you like, freely.
You don't have to worry about living expenses. My grandfather-in-law told me, but I chose to be with him. If I'm not in the way, please let me be with you. When I said that, my grandfather-in-law's eyes welled up with tears. Thanks to Mr. Jones, the divorce was finalized, and procedures were taken to exclude my former father-in-law and former husband from inheritance. And I became my grandfather-in-law's adopted daughter. If anything happens to my grandfather-in-law, who has become my father, I intend to take care of him until the end. Now, the two of us enjoy working in the fields together.
Dad, look at this radish. It's big.
In the pouring sunlight, warm moments flow. I wish for these days to continue even one day longer.
Ah! Look, it's the bitch!
My 6-year-old daughter pointed at the woman who had come to our house. Today was the day my son brought his fiancée over. I quickly lowered my daughter's pointing hand and bowed repeatedly to the fiancée, embarrassed by the terrible thing my daughter had said to her. Upon hearing this, my daughter looked up at me with pure curiosity and said,
"But, sis was happy being called a bitch."
My name is Trinity. At 31, I'm living my life juggling work and parenting. You could say I'm a working mom. My husband, Michael, is also 31. A kind and justice-driven man, Michael is a well-respected salesman within his company. He's supportive in both childcare and household chores, always taking the initiative without me having to ask. It's truly a blessing, especially when I come home tired from work. Marrying Michael was the best decision of my life. Every day, I'm grateful for my husband, Michael. Our daughter, Yasmin, is 6 years old. Full of growth and energy, Yasmin's curiosity knows no bounds. Every day she discovers something new and excitedly shouts,
"Mom, look!"
enjoying her own little world. It's a relief when she can play by herself, especially when I'm tied up with household chores. Reaching my 30s, I've noticed a waning interest in the wider world, making Yasmin's daily joy frankly enviable. With my husband often away on business trips, he's mostly home only on weekends and holidays. Since I often work weekends too, the days when the whole family is together are rare. However, we're a close-knit family, making the most of our time together, whether we're going on trips or playing locally. Our family relationship is very healthy. Occasionally, my mom, who lives nearby, comes over to visit. Yasmin adores my mom, always exclaiming,
"Grandma! Grandma!"
in excitement. It's heartwarming to see my mom happily respond with a
"Yes"
to Yasmin's calls. For me, busy with work, My mom's presence is invaluable. Compared to mom, I've always had a strained relationship with my dad. There's no clear reason, but our personalities just don't mesh. We have different perspectives, and it seems we disagree on everything. You encounter such people at work too, but the best strategy is usually to keep your distance. It seems Dad feels the same way, hardly ever showing up at my house. Even when I introduced Michael, Dad opposed our marriage. His reason being, something about him just doesn't sit right. Something about him just doesn't sit right. Such a selfish reason. To oppose the person your daughter has seriously chosen to be with, just because you don't like something about them, is just too selfish. My already poor relationship with Dad only worsened after he opposed our marriage. But I went ahead and married Michael, ignoring my dad's opposition, because it's my life. Maybe out of a sense of guilt, I found myself avoiding Dad after the wedding. I get along well with Michael's parents, my in-laws, who live far away. When we can take long vacations in summer and winter, I take Michael and Yasmin to visit them. Yasmin has been familiar with them since she was little, so she's not shy at all and is very dear to them. I've always been close to my brother Trevor, who is 5 years older. Our attachment to each other might seem a bit unusual to some. We even exchange emails daily. I share updates about Yasmin's growth and family events, while Trevor vents about work. Whenever something about Yasmin troubles me, talking to Trevor usually helps me forget by the next day. That's how important Trevor is to me. Currently, Trevor, who works for a major corporation, is not only kind and stylish but also handsome. It's a wonder why he doesn't have a girlfriend. Though he's popular, he seems uninterested in romance. His lack of interest in love is, ironically, what draws women to him, something Trevor hasn't realized. Despite everything, we've been living a happy life, supported by a loving family. Then one day, I got a phone call. Hello?
Trinity? It's me.
The caller, unusually, was Trevor. Maybe it was just my imagination, but Trevor's voice seemed unusually lively.
I've got a fiancé.
My intuition was right.
No way. Congratulations. That's great, Trevor.
I was as happy for my beloved Trevor as if the good news were my own. A smile naturally spread across my face.
Trevor, you're so cool but never seemed interested in love. You finally met the right person. I'm so happy for you. So, who is she?
When I asked, Trevor said a bit shyly.
She's someone you'd get along with, really kind. I'll introduce her when you come to our parents' house in 3 months.
In 3 months, got it. Let me know when it's closer, and I'll take time off work. And with one more.
Congratulations.
I ended the call with Trevor. Even after hanging up, my excitement didn't fade. My beloved Trevor was getting married. I wondered what his partner was like, hoping we'd get along well. Filled with anticipation, I looked forward to the 3 months until Trevor's visit. Then, one day, on the way back from picking up my daughter Yasmin from the childcare center, she suddenly said, "Mom, I want to have a doggy." "A doggy? You mean a dog? What brought this on all of a sudden?" Yasmin likes dogs, but has never said she wanted one. Maybe one of Yasmin's friends at the childcare center bought a dog and told her about it. Because Dad called someone a doggy the other day. Yasmin gave an answer that I wasn't sure made any sense. Michael called someone a doggy? Would he say something like that? Feeling puzzled, I casually asked Yasmin about it. Did Dad really say that to you? Why would he? But Yasmin seemed to have lost interest in dogs already, now talking to a flower blooming nearby.
Hello, Mr. Flower. Hello, Mr. Flower.
Maybe it's not something to worry about too much. That's what I thought, but even after we got home, took a shower with Yasmin, and ate dinner, the doggy Michael mentioned wouldn't leave my mind. After Michael got home and Yasmin was put to bed, I decided to ask him directly. Hey, this might sound like a weird question, but what's this doggy thing about? Michael seemed momentarily flustered by my question, then said with a bit of panic, "Oh, I went to a pet shop for work recently and saw some puppies. It made me think how nice it would be to have a dog. You know, they say kids grow up kinder with pets around." So, the doggy Michael mentioned was about a puppy he saw at the pet shop. He must have talked to Yasmin about the puppies.
Oh, so that's what it was. I was curious because it's not like you to talk about wanting a dog.
Hearing the answer directly from Michael, I felt relieved. It's nothing to worry about, you're overthinking it, Michael said with a laugh, so I decided not to dwell on it any further. 3 months had passed since Trevor's marriage announcement, and the day he was coming home finally arrived. Michael had work and said he would come after it was done, so Yasmin and I headed to my parents' house first. Mom, who seemed happy that Trevor was coming, greeted us with,
"Trinity, come in, come in,"
smiling more joyously than usual. Unlike with me, Dad, who gets along well with Trevor, was in a good mood for this occasion. Until Trevor and his fiancée arrived, I helped Mom with cooking. We wanted to welcome Trevor and his fiancée with the best celebration possible. Yasmin was playing with Dad. The table was filled with Trevor's favorite dishes and the favorite foods of Trevor's fiancée, which I had asked about beforehand. Looking at the dishes laid out, I felt a bit of unease. It kind of resembles Michael's favorite dishes. But it must be a coincidence. As I was thinking this, the doorbell rang, and Trevor and his fiancée appeared. Michael hadn't finished work yet and wasn't there, but we started the meet and greet with just the family. Trevor's fiancée is apparently named Riley. I could hear Mom from the entrance. "Welcome, Riley." Mom greeted them, and the two stepped into the living room where Dad, Yasmin, and I were. At that moment, a voice came from beside me. Not a blessing, but an unexpected remark.
"Ah, look, it's the bitch."
Pointing at Riley, the voice was Yasmin's, who continued pointing while laughing. Riley, with her beautiful face, looked puzzled at Yasmin.
"Yasmin, that's rude to our guest."
I scolded her, and Yasmin made a sullen face and said,
"Because Dad called her that. And Big Sis looked so happy about it. Why is it okay for Dad to say it, but not me? I was just playing with Dad when Mom wasn't around."
Yasmin's baffling statement had me, Mom, Dad, and Trevor all scratching our heads. Just then, the doorbell rang, and Michael, having finished work, arrived. I went to welcome Michael, who then entered the living room. And that's when things took a sudden turn.
"Cheater!"
A voice suddenly erupted. Looking towards the source, it was Michael, his face red with anger, yelling at Trevor's fiancée, Riley.
"Why are you here? What's the meaning of this? Is this some kind of harassment?"
Michael was uncontrollably furious. His unusual behavior puzzled everyone else. Michael seemed to not even notice me, our parents, or Yasmin. Then, Riley, Trevor's fiancée, started raising her voice. Gone was her gentle demeanor, now replaced by a harsh tone, furrowing her brows.
"Why are you here? And why should I be the one blamed? You were the one who came on to me. I was never serious about you."
Riley was infuriated, blood rushing to her head. Although initially shocked, I began to understand the nature of their conversation was about an affair.
"You're the one who said you wanted me to come over on holidays. I went out of my way for you, And this is how it ends. Give me back my weekends.
Michael and Riley had been having an affair. And it seems they were using the weekends when I wasn't around for their escapades. They apparently enjoyed treating each other like pets frequently. Yasmin must have seen this. That's why she started talking about Doggy in such a strange way. The reason the prepared food resembled Michael's favorites makes sense now. They must have been dining out together often. All the pieces of unease clicked together in my mind. Realizing the truth, I immediately took Yasmin's hand and left the living room. I couldn't let Yasmin hear any of this. Whatever happens with Michael can be dealt with later, but Yasmin must be protected at all costs. Then Mom appeared and gently placed her hand on me. "I'll stay with Yasmin." It was her way of telling me to go back. I nodded and headed back to the living room. Inside, the heated argument between Michael and Riley continued. The conversation revolved mainly around their affair. It was too much for me to bear, feeling dizzy just listening to them.
Wait, just a minute.
Finding a moment to interrupt their exchange was impossible. Their back and forth was intense and unrelenting. After several minutes, their argument finally began to subside. As they became aware of us around them, both crumbled to their knees, faces turning pale. "Michael, what is this? Explain yourself." The moment I began to confront Michael, he collapsed backward with a groan.
Enough. You are no longer family or anything to me. Get out now. Don't you dare touch my daughter.
It was Dad who struck Michael.
You too, don't ever come back.
Dad said this to Riley, then, with Riley and Michael unable to move, he pulled them by the arms and threw them out of the front door. And with one last remark, he spat out, "You two deserve the worst." In a setting meant for marriage introductions, Michael and Riley were thrown out for their affair being exposed. Afterward, I demanded a divorce and compensation from Michael in court. Ignoring Michael's futile pleas of, "Let's talk it over," I proceeded with the divorce.
It's too late to talk things over now. If you hadn't done anything in the first place, we wouldn't be in this situation.
That was the last thing I said to Michael. Trevor, of course, called off his engagement with Riley.
We're never going to see each other again. Don't contact me.
Riley, in tears, pleaded with Trevor to reconsider the broken engagement.
Please. I won't see that man again. Just give me one more chance.
But Trevor, like me, dismissed Riley. People who do such things once will do them again. He then demanded compensation for the broken engagement from Riley. After the divorce, rumors of Michael's affair quickly spread throughout his company and to his clients, eroding the trust he had slowly built up. He was transferred to a department with no work to do, leading a life devoid of excitement. Riley, having quit her job in anticipation of marrying Trevor, found herself in debt due to the compensation payments. She ended up juggling multiple part-time jobs, working tirelessly every day without a break. Riley's dream of an easy life through marriage to Trevor turned into a nightmare of the exact opposite. Her ideal wedding plans were shattered overnight. It's true what they say, wrongdoing doesn't pay. Having closed the chapter on Michael, I returned home with Yasmin. Mom looked at me, slightly worn out, and asked with concern, "Trinity, are you okay?"
Mom, I'm fine. It's good that Yasmin found out before she got any older. Some of it might stick in her memory, though.
Then, to Dad, who was reading the newspaper in the living room. Dad, who had struck Michael at that moment. I could never have been as decisive.
Dad, thank you for what you did with Michael. You were right. I was swept up in the moment thinking he was the one, but I should have been more discerning in judging people.
When I apologized to Dad, he looked up from his newspaper and said to me, "Trinity, I'm sorry. I should have been more assertive in stopping you. I thought it would make you unhappy, but I didn't have a clear reason. Just not liking someone isn't enough for you to be convinced, right?" Maybe I was just convinced that Dad and I didn't get along, that we weren't close. It's not your fault, Dad. I've learned a lot from this experience. Laughing together, Dad and I looked at each other as if to say, what was all that past conflict about? That's just how family relationships are, it seems. Misunderstanding each other for no reason, and before you know it, making up. I hope Yasmin and I can build that kind of relationship from now on. As for Trevor, he was shocked by Riley's affair and insisted he didn't want a girlfriend for a while. I'm done with that kind of pain. To think that the person I was about to marry was having an affair with my sister's husband. After living as a bachelor for some time, nursing his wounds, Trevor finally began to move on from Riley. He eventually married someone from a company he was dealing with. Trevor's new wife, a beautiful and wonderful woman, was truly deserving to walk by his side.
Can I tell Uncle? Really?
My 7-year-old niece said this as she alternated her gaze between my son and my husband. My son is about to turn 3, but he still can't speak. My niece, talking as if she's having a conversation with my son, looked up at my husband with a worried expression.
Uncle, you see.
My name is Melanie. I work at a staffing agency, and my husband, Timothy, works at the same company. Timothy and I met as colleagues at the company, and since we were close in age, we started dating through work consultations and eventually got married. Then, I became pregnant with our son, Hunter, and took maternity leave and parental leave. When Hunter turned 1, we looked for a child care center to enroll him in, and I went back to work as planned, originally intending to return immediately. While sending our child to the child care center, I worked to get back into the pace of work, and with Timothy's help, we managed to get through the busy days of work and childcare without any spare time. When we absolutely couldn't manage, or when Hunter got sick and had to leave the child care center early, Madison, my mother-in-law who lives nearby, would often pick him up from the child care center or watch over Hunter while I did household chores. We were very grateful, but Madison gradually started suggesting that we should quit the child care center. In fact, Hunter was relatively advanced compared to children his age. He began walking just after turning 1, and though not yet conversational, he understood our words and could communicate simply. Madison started treating Hunter like a prodigy, insisting he shouldn't be in a public child care center but rather receive gifted education under her constant care. This suggestion had us worried. While we were indebted to her, we tried to refuse politely by saying Hunter enjoyed the child care center, which only made Madison furious. She didn't like that I had returned to work while Hunter was still so young and berated us, saying,
"You don't love Hunter. Leaving him in childcare all day is negligent. Unlike you, I would be willing to stay with him all the time and take care of everything. Just hand Hunter over to me."
I was shocked by Madison's accusation of being a bad mother, but I was even more frightened by her treating Hunter as an object to be handed over. After that, we tried not to rely on Madison, and if Timothy wasn't home when she came over, I pretended to be out. However, Madison started taking actions that couldn't be ignored, like picking up Hunter from childcare without our consent or trying to steal our house keys after bringing over sweets and insisting on coming in. Timothy, too, gave up on reasoning with her after seeing her unreasonableness. We decided to move without telling Madison and began looking for a new place in secret. However, finding a new home proved difficult. We thought it would be easy to find a house in a growing city, but with many people moving in, convenient properties sold quickly. While searching for a house behind Madison's back proved difficult, half a year flew by in no time. By then, Madison's interest in Hunter had waned significantly. Actually, even at a year and a half, Hunter still wasn't speaking at all. He used to babble a lot when he was younger, but lately, he's been completely silent except when crying. Taking him to the hospital worriedly, we found nothing abnormal. We were told that language development varies greatly among children and to keep a careful watch, so we went home carrying our worries. Seeing Hunter like this, Madison did a complete turnaround from treating him as a prodigy, declaring, "Not speaking much just means he's a disabled child. There must be something wrong with Melanie's body, and that's why she gave birth to a strange child. I don't know why Timothy ever married someone like her." And she labeled it as a disease. Despite the doctor's diagnosis, being told Hunter was sick and that I was abnormal brought me to tears. Madison hadn't been coming to our house recently, but when she did, it was unbearable how she could say such awful things, leaving me completely distraught. Then, Timothy got angrier than I've ever seen, declared we were cutting ties with Madison, and forcefully kicked her out of the house. After blocking Madison's contacts, we began to ignore her completely, even if she came to the house. Knowing Timothy's firm stance, Madison shouted, "I don't need a wife or grandson with disabilities," and never returned to our house again. Since then, we have been living peacefully as a family of 3, and before we knew it, Hunter turned 3, yet he still hadn't spoken a word. Considering it unusual for him not to speak by this point, we were advised at a public health screening to have Hunter examined at a major hospital. When Hunter and I went to the hospital recommended to us, we unexpectedly ran into my sister Yasmin and my niece Rose, who were there for vaccinations. Yasmin and Rose live far away, and because we had been busy, it had been difficult to meet, so we were delighted by this long-awaited reunion. Since Yasmin and Rose hadn't met Hunter since his birth, they greeted him for the first time.
"What's your name?" "Hunter? That's cool." Yes, you're in the rabbit class, aren't you?" "Rose loves rabbits too."
Despite not having mentioned Hunter's childcare class to Rose, she naturally continued the conversation as if it was obvious. Surprised, I asked Yasmin, and she said that Rose can understand the language of animals and babies, who can't speak. Half in doubt, yet having witnessed it firsthand, I had no choice but to believe. When the 4 of us went to the hospital cafeteria for lunch, Rose said,
"Does Hunter like hamburgers?" "Yes." "And he dislikes carrots?" "But they taste good together with hamburgers." "Does Hunter like hamburgers?" "Yes." "And he dislikes carrots?" "But they taste good together with hamburgers."
Accurately guessing Hunter's likes and dislikes without being told, which left me speechless. Even after seeing the doctor, the reason why Hunter wouldn't speak remained a mystery. There were no issues with his throat or vocal cords. He could cry and laugh, but he wouldn't utter meaningful words like mom or dad. Feeling down about not finding a solution, Timothy came to pick us up from the hospital after his rounds in the evening. Since we were together, we decided to have dinner as a family of 5, moving to a family restaurant near the hospital. While waiting for our order to arrive, Rose looked back and forth between Hunter and Timothy, then stared at Timothy anxiously. "Hunter is asking when he can start talking to Uncle," she said. Surprised, Timothy looked at me, so I told him about how Rose had correctly guessed things she shouldn't know, like class names and Hunter's likes and dislikes, leaving Timothy to let out a disbelieving sigh. "Hunter really wants to talk to both Uncle and Auntie. But he couldn't because Grandma was always around, and he was afraid of being taken away," Rose conveyed. The phrase "always around" caught my attention, and I asked Rose for clarification, given that we hadn't been seeing Madison lately. Hunter shook his head and just stared at Rose. Then, as if struck by a brilliant idea, Rose clapped her hands together, smiled joyfully, and reassured Hunter.
Grandma isn't here now, so it's okay to talk.
Hunter looked around uncertainly, then at me and Timothy.
Mom, Dad. Is Grandma really not here?
Hunter's words came out so fluently that Timothy and I were shocked. As Yasmin calmed us down in our near panic, Hunter reached out his arms, asking to be held. Hastily, I lifted him from the child's seat onto my lap, where he grabbed my hands and happily kicked his legs.
When I was a baby, Grandma said she was going to take me home to talk a lot. I didn't talk because I liked Dad and Mom's house better.
Hunter had simply chosen not to speak. This must have been around when he was about a year old. Recalling Madison's insistence on gifted education and her wanting to take him home. Furthermore, Hunter expressed his desire to talk to Timothy and me but felt he couldn't.
Because Grandma is always there. Inside Hunter's home, in the car, even at the rabbit class, he said.
I was baffled by how Madison, who didn't live with us, could always be there, even in the car or at the child care center. Then, remembering the timing of Madison's visits. On days we hadn't told her about hospital visits or when we received notifications about language training, Madison invariably showed up. Whispering my dreadful suspicion to Timothy, he looked at Hunter in dismay. Can you tell where Grandma is in the house? Timothy's soft question led Hunter to list several locations. Hearing his responses, Timothy's face turned red, and he trembled with emotion. Apologizing to Hunter for not noticing, we thanked Yasmin and Rose for their help before rushing home to confirm our bad hunch and take necessary actions. Once home, we asked Hunter again where Madison could be. Pointing with his little hands, Hunter showed us various places. Under the entrance shoe cabinet, behind the living room sofa, on the top shelf of the kitchen cabinet, and when a device was found under the bedroom bed, I felt dizzy.
When Grandma came to pick me up, she left it behind. Grandma has always been in the house.
Hunter explained, indicating that what seemed to be bugging devices had been left throughout our home, making it feel as though Madison was perpetually present. Discovering such devices within our home, similar to those seen on TV, and confirming their nature as surveillance devices available in abundance online was unsettling. Before the police arrived, Madison showed up at our house, having apparently been listening in on us as we searched for the bugs. Timothy couldn't hold back his fury, confronting Madison.
Mom, what do you think you're doing, planting bugs in our house like it's nothing? This is outrageous, creepy, and a serious crime. It's because Timothy ignored my contacts, isn't it? What's so wrong with wanting to know more about one's own family? We're family, after all. There's no need to make such a big fuss about this. More importantly, Hunter can speak. To think he can talk so much at 3, he must be gifted. Just as I thought, a real prodigy. I'll take him and provide him with gifted education, so he can work at a big company in the future. And eventually, he can take care of me in my old age. Now I can rest easy.
Madison showed no remorse for planting the listening devices, dismissing it as nothing significant. Her blatant disregard for Hunter's wishes and her self-centered assertions made us feel sick. Just as we were considering our next steps, the police arrived. After we explained the situation and the police confirmed with Madison herself, who didn't think she had done anything wrong, she readily admitted to planting the devices and was promptly taken into custody. Despite her resistance and insistence on her innocence, revealing the locations of the devices led to her being packed into a police car and taken to the station. Following Madison's confession, a specialist recommended by the police found numerous listening devices in our home and car. The realization that we hadn't noticed such extensive surveillance was embarrassing. The thought of Madison having heard all our conversations made us dizzy. In the end, Madison was arrested for burglary and criminal mischief, showing no signs of remorse for her excessive actions, even though it was her son and Dil's home. Furthermore, during the interrogation, Madison confessed to also planting listening devices at the child care center. Just as Hunter had said, she had bugged the class he attended. She had paid a staff member, who was a friend, to install them. An investigation at the child care center indeed found several devices. The staff member who assisted Madison faced serious legal consequences and disciplinary action. Timothy was deeply affected by his mother's disturbing behavior. But most importantly, for Hunter and me, we decided to move away from this town filled with unpleasant memories as quickly as possible while Madison was preoccupied with police proceedings, seeking a peaceful life. Considering our job situations, we decided to move near Yasmin's family. Upon explaining our circumstances, Yasmin's family was shocked but understanding, offering their sympathy and saying, "You've been through a lot, well done." With Yasmin's family helping with the move, everything went smoothly. Since then, despite it being her first offense, Madison received a prison sentence due to the malicious, cunning nature of her actions, which were premeditated and carried out with clear intent. Despite Madison's full confession, she seemed unable to comprehend why her attempts to learn more about her family were met with such serious consequences, ranting and causing a scene at the police station, claiming,
Let me out of here! I was just trying to get to know my family better. I've done nothing wrong.
When we were informed by the new residents of our old home about a letter filled with grievances and demands for release that Madison sent, it was a stark reminder of how fortunate we were to have moved to a place beyond her reach, and the thought of what could have happened if Hunter had been taken by her sent shivers down our spine. Now, free from Madison's watchful eyes and with Hunter able to speak without any reservations, our family enjoys brighter and more communicative days together. Hunter's verbal skills are impressively advanced for a 3-year-old, leading us to wonder if he might indeed be what Madison claimed, a gifted child. However, this does not justify Madison's actions, nor does it mean we are willing to forgive her. Living closer to Yasmin's family has enriched our lives with increased interactions, and Yasmin has been a great help with tasks like picking Hunter up from childcare, which Madison used to handle. Our weekends are now filled with joyous outings to amusement parks, zoos, and trips planned together, fostering a close and supportive relationship. Reflecting on the hardships Hunter endured, we are determined to compensate for the past by ensuring he grows up in an environment where he can freely express himself without restraint, committed to never letting him feel suppressed again.
Useless woman! If you're done cleaning, get out of here. It was Christmas, and I was thrown out into the snowy, freezing garden. Hey, it's cold. At least let me change my clothes. My body was covered in sweat from a day's worth of housework, and my wet clothes were rapidly stealing my body heat. There you go. From inside the house, my mother-in-law, Nancy, threw my bag, coat, and shoes outside with a look of annoyance. The front door and windows were locked from the inside, and I couldn't get back in. I felt like I was going to freeze to death. I had to do something. My name is Mary, and I'm 50 years old. I work a part-time job as a cashier at a local supermarket. My husband Charles is a construction worker, and it's been 25 years since we got married. We've always lived in a small apartment, but a few years ago our only son, John, moved out to go to college. And since then, the room has felt both bigger and lonelier. We were never financially well off, but we managed to send our son to college. Last year he got married and moved to a condominium in the next town with his wife, Jessica, starting their life together. Around that time, Charles approached me and asked, What do you think about moving in with my mom? After Charles' father, David, passed away from an illness about 10 years ago, Nancy has been living alone. Our apartment wasn't far from her house, so we would visit her once or twice a month to check on her. Nancy in her late 70s seemed to be doing well, but Charles said he wanted to be there to take care of her just in case, given her age. Charles is an only child, and he seemed worried about his mother growing older. Feeling a bit lonely since our son got married, I could empathize with Nancy's situation and agreed to Charles' offer to live together. Charles' childhood home had a garden and, although a bit old, had enough rooms. A light renovation would make it spacious enough for the three of us to live comfortably. We didn't have enough money to build a new house, but we had enough saved up for the down payment on the renovation. The remaining cost could be covered by a loan. Through Charles' work connections, we found a renovation contractor and the work was completed in about a month. Since we knew the contractor, they finished the job for less than the market rate, which helped us save money. I am not an old lady, you know. Jeez. Nancy put on a brave face, but she seemed to like the newly renovated house. Our son helped us move the heavy furniture and the move was done in no time. Sitting in the newly renovated living room drinking coffee with 3 generations of family, I felt a warmth in my heart as if we were experiencing a family reunion for the first time in a long while. When we began living with Nancy, I noticed she hardly did anything around the house. Previously, whenever we'd pop in for a visit, it was never for long, so I hadn't really paid it much mind. When she lived alone, it seemed she just cleaned what was visible and barely did any other housework. She hardly cooked for herself, mostly relying on pre-packaged meals and supermarket deli foods. No wonder I found so many empty plastic trays and food containers in the house before we renovated, I thought to myself. It made sense to me. When I asked Charles about it, he mentioned she had always been that way, often using ready-made or frozen meals. I had heard that Nancy used to work full-time, so initially, I thought maybe her busy schedule was to blame. But now, even with all the time in the world at home, she doesn't cook, clean, or do laundry. Nothing. All those tasks fall on me, while she enjoys chatting over coffee with friends who come to visit. Mary, make some coffee. Haven't you boiled any water? Do that at least. I'd hear Nancy's voice calling out to me almost every day. I only let you guys move in because my son insisted, but you know, she's quite thoughtless. She would say to her friends, I never asked to move in with her. It was Charles who insisted because he was worried about his mom. He felt obligated to stay with her. If she's having friends over, the least she could do is prepare the coffee herself. I wish she wouldn't badmouth me as if I'm the one at fault. I still have my part-time job. When I'm not working, I'm swamped with housework from dawn to dusk with no time for myself. Every day, without fail, another friend of Nancy's drops by. At this rate, I wondered if there was even a need to live together. Being friends with Nancy, they seem quite alike. Oh, I forgot to bring cookies. Mary, was it? Could you buy some? They treat me like a servant and not even reimburse me. When I brought this up to Nancy, she'd laugh it off. Don't be so pity. Lighten up. Every week, she'd dress up and go out shopping or somewhere with her friends, not returning till late. Meanwhile, I'd be drowning in housework. Charles, maybe because he's busy at work, would often come home late. On rare occasions he came home early, he'd be drunk and just go to sleep. Whenever I tried to discuss Nancy's behavior with him during such times, he'd snap, "Quit nagging. Mom's always been like that." If I approached him sober, he'd just dismissively say, "She's getting old, let her be." "You might tolerate it because she's your mom, but think about what I have to deal with," I'd retort. Yeah, I got it, I'll talk to her," he'd say, but then just fall asleep snoring. I considered discussing it with our son, but I hesitated to burden the young couple with our problems. As December rolled in, I got a call that Charles had an accident at work. I rushed to the hospital. Thankfully, his life wasn't in danger, but he had fractured his leg. We were now set to spend Christmas in the hospital. Normally, my son comes home for Christmas and we spend the holiday together, but this year he got married and I was wondering what to do. So, Nancy, I know this is a weird time to ask, but what are you doing for Christmas? Charles won't be able to leave the hospital for a while, and I'm not sure how to spend Christmas at my in-laws, so I decided to ask Nancy. She responded, "Christmas? What did you used to do?" "I used to spend it with John, my son. He would come home and we'd be together," I replied. "Well, why don't you go to John's? You're family. There's no need to be shy," she suggested. Even though he's my son, I feel like I'd be intruding on the newlyweds, and I feel bad about it. But Nancy has a point. I decided to call my son and see what he says. If he says no, I'll figure something out then. I called John on his mobile phone and explained that Charles is injured and will be spending Christmas in the hospital. "So what will you do, Mom?" he asked. I braced myself for rejection and asked, "Well, I was wondering if I could come to your place." To my surprise, he agreed. "Sure, Jessica wants to have a good chat with you too. It works out perfectly." I was taken aback by how easily he agreed. When I told Nancy, she was pleased and said, "Yes, that's good. Take your time," she said, seeming to be in an unusually good mood. I asked her, "What about you, Nancy? What will you do?" "Me? Oh, I'll be fine by myself," she replied. I was surprised by her response, as I was expecting her to be busy during Christmas. "So, I'll finish up the housework and head over to John's on Christmas Day," I told her. On our way back from the hospital, Nancy and I talked about our plans. It was the coldest day of the year, with snow flurries in the air. I had prepared everything the night before, so in the morning I was busy wiping windows and cleaning the kitchen. Even Nancy, who usually doesn't do much, helped me clean the floors in the shower room. I was surprised by her helpfulness. After finishing the cleaning inside the house, I picked up a broom and started sweeping the yard. It felt warm when I first stepped outside, but as the day went on, it got colder. I planned to go inside to put on more layers, but when I tried to open the front door, it was locked. I walked around the house, but all the doors were locked. I wonder if Nancy forgot I was outside and locked the door. "Nancy, please open up." I called out to Nancy in a loud voice. "Are you still here? I thought you left a while ago." I heard Nancy's voice from inside. My sweaty body started to feel cold, and I couldn't stop shivering. "I haven't changed yet, and my luggage is still inside. Please, I'm begging you to open the door." I raised my voice in desperation. "There. Isn't the cleaning done already? Hurry up and go," Nancy said while roughly throwing my rolling bag, shoes, and coat through the large window next to the front door. After that, no matter how much I screamed, there was no response from inside. With no other choice, I put on the cleaning sandals instead of my shoes, wrapped my coat around my chilled body, and walked to the bus stop. My son's condominium is about a 20-minute bus ride from my in-laws' house. "Mom, you're late. I was about to go pick you up because I was worried." My son greeted me at the entrance of his condominium after I pressed the intercom button on the first floor. "Mary! Long time no see." I was greeted with a smile by my son's wife, Jessica, as she let me in the room. This is the first time I've seen Jessica since their wedding. She's a petite woman with a cute smile. "Mom, you look frozen. Did something happen?" I told my son about how I was locked out by Nancy while gardening. "Mary, go take a shower and warm up your chilled body first," Jessica said kindly. Her words touched my heart, and I felt like I was about to cry. "Thank you, I'll do just that," I said, and Jessica showed me to the shower room. As I took a warm shower, I could feel the warmth gradually returning to the core of my body and the sensation returning to my fingertips. It's been a while since I've taken such a leisurely shower. I felt a sense of peace that I had almost forgotten. Once I felt relieved and the hard things I had been through came flooding back, I started crying again. After the shower, a meal was prepared. "I'm not sure if it's to your liking, but please go ahead." Having a meal prepared for me without having to cook myself. It's been years since that last happened. I took a bite. Delicious. It was a nostalgic taste. "Jessica, you're a great cook," I complimented her. I asked my mom for the recipe and practiced for today. I'm so happy. Thank you," Jessica said with a shy smile. It's been a while since I've had such an enjoyable meal. After the meal, I felt happy as I helped Jessica clean up the dishes. I didn't want to ruin the mood, but I began to quietly talk about what happened at my in-laws' house. My son considerately asked Jessica to leave the room. He probably didn't want her to hear too much. After listening to my whole story, my son seemed to remember something and said, "By the way, Nancy didn't pay much attention to me when I was little, and she didn't seem too happy either. Come to think of it, we only took him to his grandparents' house when he was little. It seems it wasn't just because he got busy playing with his friends that he stopped visiting them. She once told me to go away when I visited," he added. My son had his own thoughts about Nancy. He continued, "But I didn't think it was that bad. Once things settle down, let's go visit Nancy together," he said. Since we started living together, Nancy has treated me terribly, but today was a bit strange even compared to that. I felt relieved knowing that my son would be with me. After pouring out what was in my heart, I felt much lighter. I never thought we could talk about this kind of thing. My son has really grown up. The next morning, as per my usual routine, I got up early and was relaxing in the living room watching TV. I thought about preparing breakfast, but I didn't want to touch the kitchen without permission, so I decided to take it easy. My son and his wife were still asleep. Suddenly the phone rang. Who could it be this early in the morning? I wondered as I checked the display. It was my in-law's number. Surprised, I answered the phone, and a male voice that I didn't recognize spoke from the other end. "Nancy's in trouble. Please help." Nancy? That's my mother-in-law's name, but whose voice was that? "Who are you? Why are you there?" I asked. The man on the other end stuttered. Then the call was cut off. A bad feeling washed over me, and I quickly woke up my son. We headed to my in-laws' house together. When we arrived, the front door was unlocked. "Nancy?" We called out as we entered the house, but there was no response. My son and I cautiously proceeded inside. We didn't know the identity of the man from the phone call or if he was still there. There was no sign of anyone in the living room. We could hear the sound of running water from the shower room, so we went to check and found Nancy lying on the floor, unconscious but breathing. "John, call an ambulance, hurry!" I shouted to my son. At the emergency hospital, Nancy was receiving life-saving treatment. She was diagnosed with a cerebral hemorrhage, and although she pulled through, she was still unconscious, so visitors were not allowed. We couldn't ask Nancy what happened between Christmas night and the morning, leaving us in the dark about the situation. I started visiting the hospital every day, but it wasn't until a week after Nancy had been admitted that she regained consciousness. By that time, Charles had also recovered enough to walk with crutches, so he had been discharged from the hospital. However, he wasn't quite used to the crutches yet and couldn't walk for long periods, so I was the only one who ended up going to visit Nancy. When I arrived at the hospital, Nancy was still bedridden. "Thank goodness you're okay, Nancy." I spoke to her, but Nancy just silently stared at the ceiling. "I received a call for John." The moment I mentioned that, Nancy looked at me in surprise. "Who was it from?" Nancy asked. I didn't know. I was the one who answered the phone, but I didn't recognize the person. Nancy just silently murmured, "I see. It was a man." Why was he at our house so early in the morning? The front door was left wide open. Who was that man whose voice I heard? I pressed her for answers. Just a friend's husband, Nancy replied. Even if that were true, it was outrageous for him to visit so early in the morning. Besides, it was strange that the door had been left open. After locking me out, someone had unlocked it from the inside, and Nancy had been found collapsed in the shower. Even if someone had come to visit, they wouldn't have been able to enter the house and find Nancy had the door been locked. Also, the man had called John's condominium from my in-laws' phone. When I pressed Nancy further, she finally started to open up. Alright, I'll tell you. That man was my lover, from even before I married David. And he was my lover while David was alive too. Are you happy now? Just leave me alone. I was dumbfounded by my mother-in-law's confession. She had brought her lover into our house during Christmas when we were away, and she had locked me out because he was already inside. I wonder when he had entered the house. She also revealed that after the renovation, she and her lover had planned to kick us out of my in-laws' house and live there together. It was an unbelievable story. They say late life love is a thing, but I wish they would just do it without involving us. I didn't want to be a part of it. In that case, please have him take care of you. We don't want to know anything about it. David is gone, and you are free to do as you please, I told Nancy. You ungrateful brat! How dare you talk to me like that? Nancy scolded me. She may have been bedridden, but her mouth was as sharp as ever. Who's ungrateful? I've been doing all the housework while juggling a part-time job. The house is clean because we paid for it, remember? With that, I left the hospital room. I could hear Nancy's sobs and curses behind me, but I didn't care. She could do whatever she wanted. When I returned to my in-laws' house, I told Charles everything. His response was shocking. Ah, that guy. I've known about him for a long time. Dad's gone and Mom's all alone. Just let it go, Charles said. My head started spinning. How dare she try to kick us out after we spent money on renovations? Can you really ask me to forgive that? I was furious and yelled at Charles. If Mom says so, we just have to put up with it. Charles said that to me, but I couldn't even look him in the eye. Fine, I can't live with you any longer. I'm leaving, I said, pushing him away. Don't say that. We've gotten along for over 20 years. Charles tried to stop me in panic, but my mind was made up. No, Nancy wants her freedom, and I'm going to take mine too. My son is married and has a happy family. There's no need for us to be husband and wife anymore. You're old enough. How about you graduate from Nancy too? I have no interest in a 50-year-old man who can't escape from being a mama's boy. Charles turned red and looked like he wanted to say something, but he was silenced by my words and said nothing. Now he just has to talk to Nancy and figure it out. I want nothing to do with them anymore. Later, Charles and I got divorced. For now, I've decided to live with my son and his wife until I find a place. My son says, "You can live with us as long as you want, but I want to enjoy my freedom for a while." I'll gratefully accept their offer in spirit. Meanwhile, Jessica is expecting a baby. I plan to help my son and his wife with the baby, but I don't want to interfere too much. I'll wait until they ask for help. Enjoying the growth of a child is a privilege of the parents. Children grow up in the blink of an eye. I hope they cherished their time as a family. Nancy has been discharged from the hospital, but she's paralyzed and now lives in a wheelchair. I heard her lover was married, so she didn't want to make a big fuss. So when Nancy collapsed, she didn't call an ambulance and instead called a number registered in her phone, which happened to be John's condo. The man disappeared without a word. All the friends who used to visit stopped coming, and her lover abandoned her. Now she can't move freely and lives a difficult life. Charles might be fired from his company because his broken leg hasn't fully healed, and he's no use in field work. I, on the other hand, have been promoted from part-time to full-time. and I'm about to find a new apartment. I'm looking forward to enjoying the second chapter of my life.
What? Rowan's getting married? It was a sudden announcement. The talk of the town is that our step-grandchild is getting hitched. But the real shocker was what my son and his wife said next. From now on, we want to live just as a family. So, the maid we no longer need, you can leave. They probably think I'm floored by this. At last, 15 years of living together was worth it, I sighed. Just then, someone appeared behind me. My name is Charlotte, a 57-year-old housewife. I married my husband Anthony 37 years ago when I was 20. Back then, I just started working after graduating from beauty school. But life had other plans. I got pregnant, so we got married. I had wanted to work longer and didn't expect to marry so soon. I sometimes wondered how this happened. I had my doubts, but Anthony promised, "I will make sure you and our child are happy." Believing him, I committed to spend my life with him. And Anthony kept his promise. He always took great care of me. He was attentive during my pregnancy and even took the lead in household chores. Then, I gave birth to our first son, John. Anthony was wonderful with him too. "John, let's go play catch." Yay! We could often go to the park on weekends. I would tag along and watch them play, feeling content. Anthony worked hard during the week and made family time on weekends. So, when John was young, I didn't need to work. When he started elementary school, I began working part-time. I contributed the money to his future tuition and our savings. We lived comfortably without financial worries. John grew quickly and advanced through middle and high school. From the outside, we were a picture-perfect family, and I felt very happy. But every family has its worries. John was generally a good kid, but easily influenced by others. He would pick up behaviors from his classmates or girlfriends. In middle school, he had some mischievous friends and would sometimes misbehave. Anthony and I would scold him, but he never took it seriously. Fortunately, things changed in 9th grade. His new circle was more studious. He passed the exams for a public high school. It wasn't the best school, but definitely better than a rowdy private school. For better or worse, he is impressionable, so I wished for him to be around hard-working peers. At first, he did well in school, but by the time he hit 11th grade, his grades took a nosedive. Even when confronted, John didn't have much to say. He just wasn't motivated, it seemed. I had offered John tutoring or extra classes when I noticed he was struggling at school. "I don't need that," he vehemently declared. But his grades kept on plummeting. One day, I caught him walking hand in hand with a girl. That's when it clicked. His grades were falling because he had a girlfriend and was preoccupied with her. I was at my wit's end. Talking about love and relationships with a teenage boy, good luck getting through to him. If he finds out I saw them, he'll probably be mortified. And he might even take it out on me, making his grades worse. I decided to confide in Anthony. Anthony said, "Let me have a chat with him." After dinner, Anthony went to John's room and they started talking. Anxiously, I did the dishes and waited for Anthony to come back. About 30 minutes later, Anthony returned to the living room. I had a good talk with him. Just like you said, he got carried away with his new girlfriend. They were on long phone calls and texting even during exams. I reminded him that studies should come first, and he agreed to refocus. Anthony updated me. "Thank you." I sighed with relief. grateful for Anthony's steady parenting. If I had confronted John, it probably would have ended in an argument. From then on, John's grades gradually improved, reaching an average level. Soon enough, he was in his senior year of high school and became a college applicant. His grades weren't stellar, but there were colleges within his reach. He applied to those with higher chances of acceptance and got in successfully. Finally, I breathed a sigh of relief that we had managed to get him into college. With John becoming more independent, Anthony and I had more time to go on coffee dates and little trips, just like the early days of our marriage. I felt like we were dating again, or just newlyweds. Right after we got married, we rushed off on trips, thinking I'd soon be pregnant. That's why I wanted to go on a leisurely trip with my husband, just the two of us. As we spent quality time together, I couldn't help but notice how different our conversations are now. When we were dating, it was all about Anthony's work or my school life. Now, it's mostly about our son. Couples who've been through parenting end up talking about their kids, no matter how old they get. We got married quickly after I became pregnant, so we were still quite young. I was just about in my 30s, and Anthony was in his early 40s. That's why we could travel to many places. Then time flew, and John graduated college and started working. Just when we thought our parenting days were over, John dropped a bombshell. I've decided to get married. Anthony and I couldn't believe our ears. He just started working and he's already getting married? John's only been employed for about 6 months. That's way too soon. We were worried as parents, but then we realized we got married even earlier than he did. But Anthony was 25 and had been working for 3 years. So we still thought John was rushing things. Did she get pregnant or something? Is that why you're hurrying? Since we got married due to a pregnancy, we asked him that. But it turns out that's not the case. No, I genuinely want to marry her, John confidently said. Anthony and I felt relieved. It seems like John is truly in love, and that's comforting. He's passionate and employed, so that's a good start. A few days later, we meet John's fiancée. But Anthony and I are in for another surprise. Hi, I'm Haley. Next to John's fiancée is a child, roughly between 3rd and 6th grade. Our attention shifts entirely to the boy. Who's this young man? It can't possibly be John's child. So that means... This is Rowan, my stepchild. Stepchild? Turns out, the boy is Haley's child from her previous marriage. We were stunned because we had no idea that there was a stepchild involved. I'm sorry, I haven't told my parents about the child yet. Ah, I see. Seeing our reaction, Haley also seemed puzzled. We can't stay silent forever, so I cautiously start to ask questions. So, where did you two meet? We met at work. Haley was a secretary at the company where I got my job. I see. How old are you, Haley? And how old is Rowan? I'm 30 and Rowan is 10. I see. So she had her child when she was around 20, just like me. I hate to ask, but why did you divorce your previous husband? He cheated on me. I see. Mom, Dad, you're firing questions too fast. Sorry about that. We were a bit overwhelmed with all the new information, but John seemed committed to marriage and taking care of the child, so we gave our blessing. And so John and Haley got married. They've been living happily ever after with Rowan. There are concerns, but it's good to see John leading a happy married life. But then, about 6 months later, another issue arises. Anthony suddenly falls ill. This leads to a situation where he needs constant care. From that point on, I started taking care of Anthony at our home. Though we have ample savings, managing household chores and caregiving alone was tough. Still, I want to properly care for the man I committed my life to. That's what I was thinking when my son and his wife came to visit. Mom, isn't it hard to take care of Dad alone? How about we move in? What? Turns out they were suggesting that we all live together. I was thrilled when my son and daughter-in-law suggested that we live together, so we quickly moved in with each other. Although not related by blood, I was happy to spend more time with my step-grandchild. I hadn't met Rowan, our step-grandchild, more than a few times, but he always greeted me with a smile. He wasn't very talkative, but somehow we clicked. So I never minded spending time alone with Rowan. In fact, I found it therapeutic. We would naturally talk about Anthony, or I'd ask about school, and the conversations were always enjoyable. Life with my son's family was very fulfilling when I was spending time with Rowan. However, to be honest, the rest of it was not very enjoyable. Mom, didn't I ask you to wash my shirt? Well, I have caregiving duties. Please ask Haley to do the laundry. What? You're dumping chores on me? Isn't that harassment? Haley, you're busy with childcare. It's a job for Mom. My son and daughter-in-law had been bossy and demanding. Haley never did any housework and claimed to be busy with childcare, but it seemed like she wasn't doing anything from my point of view. John never took Rowan out anywhere and was always loafing around on his days off. And when they did prepare to go out, they left Rowan in my care and took off by themselves. Why do I have to make all these concessions? In the end, my responsibilities increased, from housework to caregiving to childcare. Amidst this, sadly, Anthony's health deteriorated and he passed away. I was devastated. Anthony, despite requiring care, could still converse, and talking to him had been my stress reliever. With my long-term partner gone, it felt like there was a gaping hole in my heart. But it was my son and daughter-in-law who pulled me back to reality. Although not in a good way. How much is Dad's inheritance? How much will we get? John said this right after the funeral was over. I was speechless, hearing John speak like he wasn't saddened by his father's death. I don't know. No, you need to find out. I want my fair share. Was John always like this? No, this must be Haley's influence. I realized since we moved in, Haley had no manners and seemed to only care about herself. It's like everything else doesn't matter and there's no need for consideration. And John was probably influenced by her lack of consideration for others. Fine, we had a lawyer. He should be holding the will. After explaining this to John, I collapsed on the sofa, drained. Grandma, are you okay? The one who asked this was Rowan. Yes, I'm okay, thank you. Grandma and Grandpa were always kind to me. Now I will grow up strong to protect Grandma. Rowan. Moved, I stroked Rowan's head. Even without blood relations, bonds can deepen. That was exactly my relationship with Rowan. If Rowan could say such kind words, why couldn't John? Later, when the lawyer brought the will, my son and his wife complained about it. Isn't it unfair that Mom gets more? We are the ones who needed more financially. Look, it's what's written in the will. I don't care about that. So, Charlotte, you'd ignore us even if we're struggling financially? Well, if it comes to that, Rowan will just have to start working as soon as he finishes middle school. What? You'd make him drop out? If there's no inheritance, life will get tough. We won't be able to afford tuition, so Rowan would have to drop out and work. That's just... My son and his wife tried to exploit my close relationship with Rowan, becoming more confrontational and instilling fear in me. Fine, we can split it in half then, okay? Why didn't you say that in the first place? They agreed with a snide smile as I proposed this. From that point on, they kept threatening to make Rowan drop out, intimidating me. I felt compelled to comply with their demands, losing my spirit to resist and becoming submissive. Time flew, and before I knew it, Rowan had graduated college and was of working age. Has it really been over 10 years since we first met? Though I was filled with emotion, the hardship continued. My son and his wife continued to squat in my house even after Rowan became independent. Moreover, John quit his job and spent all day at home with Haley. I no longer had the energy to evict them, so just hoping for a peaceful day. I spent my days thinking that way. Then, 3 years later, it happened. Rowan is getting married? It was sudden news. It turns out that Rowan is getting married. And to my surprise, my son and his wife said, "Now we'll live on our own, so you're not needed anymore, housemaid. Please leave." What? They smirked, probably thinking I'd be shocked. But I couldn't contain my joy. Finally, 15 years of putting up with you both was worth it. My liberation day has come. What? What are you talking about? Confused, they didn't react as I expected. Just then, someone appeared behind me. "Grandma, I'm home. Welcome back, Rowan." "Rowan? Why are you back?" "You didn't say you'd be back today." I told Grandma. I was going to surprise you all about getting married, but looks like Mom and Dad spilled the beans. Rowan said this, and they smirked again. "Ah, so you were also looking forward to kicking Grandma out of this house?" "What? No, this house doesn't belong to anyone anymore." "What?" My son and his wife were shocked at Rowan's words. "What do you mean?" "Grandma already sold the house." "What the heck? Why would you do something like this?" John was fuming. His face beat red. "This house is in my name. I inherited it, so I have every right to sell it." "What are we supposed to do now? Where will we live?" "Yeah, we were planning on living here with Rowan and his wife as a family of 4. John and daughter-in-law were equally furious, but Rowan responded calmly. "Actually, that was a lie." "What?" "I'm planning on living somewhere else with my wife and Grandma. I came here today to pick her up." "Wait a minute, Rowan? Why are you taking this old woman with you? She's not even related by blood." "That doesn't matter. To me, Grandma is more family than my biological mom or stepdad ever were. I can't stand how you guys have always treated her. I lied about living together to throw you off guard. You would have treated my wife like a housekeeper, wouldn't you?" John and daughter-in-law looked shaken. "I can't expose my wife to people like you." "Are you abandoning your parents?" "I don't remember raising a child like you." "I don't remember being raised by you guys either. Leave the house before the cops get involved." "I can't believe this." John and daughter-in-law were in despair, their faces turning pale, and understandably so. The young couple, my son and his wife, were always buying designer goods and gallivanting around, even though neither worked. The money came from the inheritance they split with me. But money isn't endless, and they were close to depleting their share. They must felt lucky when Rowan decided to move in with them. Well, their luck ran out pretty fast. As they stood there with pale faces, I packed my bags with Rowan and left the house. After that, they were evicted and now supposedly live in an old apartment. They continue to spend recklessly, accumulating debt. Despite working multiple part-time jobs, they can't escape their mountain of debt due to their spending habits. On the other hand, I've moved into a spacious apartment where Rowan lives. Then Rowan got married, and now the three of us live together. Rowan's wife is such a wonderful person. I took to her immediately. Having trained as a beautician, I sometimes cut and style their hair. Everyone at work always compliments me on the styles you do, grandma-in-law. Rowan's wife is always delighted to report this. Now, every day is joyous as we gather around the dinner table, and I couldn't be happier.
Ivana, what are you doing here? I had just returned from shopping when I saw a figure standing frozen at the front door. I was so taken aback that I dropped my shopping bags. What about your honeymoon? I came back alone. Upon hearing this, Ivana started to cry. I am Emily, a 58-year-old housewife. My husband is Oswald, who is 60 years old. And this is about my daughter Ivana, who was supposed to be on her honeymoon, but was inexplicably standing at our front door with her suitcase. Hold on, I am totally lost here. For now, I let Ivana inside the house to hear the details. I placed Ivana's pink suitcase by the entrance and ushered her, still sobbing, into the living room. I then set a glass of iced tea on the dining table. Ivana began to sip it cautiously. I slowly began to ask questions, trying to piece the situation together. So, you came back from Hawaii all alone? Yes. She was supposed to be in Hawaii for her honeymoon, just 2 days ago. Why exactly? I am familiar with her husband Lloyd. He's a courteous man, and as far as I know, he has a significant role in a major company. He seemed very promising, like someone who could provide a stable life. That's why we celebrated their marriage. As Ivana began to speak, I learned a shocking truth. There was another woman there. Excuse me? On their honeymoon? A woman? My voice cracked in disbelief. So we ended up spending time together, all three of us. Wait, what? A honeymoon with 3 people? And a woman you didn't even know? Just hearing that made my blood boil. I pulled out my mobile phone, quickly found Lloyd's contact, and hit the call button. Wait, Mom. Ivana tries to stop me with a weak voice, but I totally ignore her. How dare he do this to my Ivana? Unforgivable. My hand holding the phone trembles. After about 3 rings, Lloyd picks up. Hold on, what's the meaning of this? You're hanging out with another woman? I started ranting without even waiting for Lloyd's response. Then, in an extremely bored tone, she's my sister, my actual sister. What are you misunderstanding? What? His actual sister? I don't know where to direct my gaze. Ivana has her head down too. Sister? Your real sister? Yes. There is nothing shady going on. She's the sister who lives in Hawaii and couldn't make it to the wedding because her kid had an ear infection. Oh. So, I have a question too. I can't reach Ivana since you seem to know what's going on here. Is she back with you? While saying this, Lloyd lets out a sigh on the other end of the phone.
Women really go off the handle so easily, making a fuss and then fly all the way back to Boston on a whim. Is it the female hormones that make you act so irrationally? Even if I got it a bit wrong, there is no need for that kind of language. That comment was totally insensitive toward women. I am getting pretty steamed. The one who acted on emotion and left is your Ivana. I will be staying in Hawaii as planned for a week. When I get back, I expect a full apology. Please let Ivana know that's the plan. With that, Lloyd hung up abruptly. I really can't wrap my head around the situation. Yeah, me neither, but Mom, you kind of jumped the gun with that phone call before we could get the full story. According to Ivana's explanation, as soon as they arrived in Hawaii, it seems Lloyd's real sister was waiting for them at the hotel. Lloyd told me, so my sister will put you through some special training to see if you're worthy of being my partner. I've never heard of a honeymoon where the groom's sister tags along to give lessons in housekeeping. What? We never talked about this. I wanted to visit the beautiful beaches and Mauna Kea mountain. When Ivana stammered this out, that's your problem, isn't it? Ivana felt emotionally shut out. But you said you wanted to go too. Once my sister's special training is over, we can go wherever we like. Of course, all three of us. The reason we chose Hawaii, where my sister lives, is precisely for this. Then a woman named Sanaya, the sister, said, "Enough talk. From today, I will be giving you an intense homemaking course. I've been doing this for years. As both a wife and a mom, I want to go all out to help my brother's marriage. Off to my house we go." So it seems this mysterious training started unfolding. So, what happened once you got to his sister's house? I found myself parched. I poured more iced tea into my empty glass to encourage the storytelling. Even though Lloyd is usually serious, it was clear from that phone call that he looked down on women, and Ivana as well. Turning a honeymoon into a housekeeping training camp? Hearing this almost made me want to throw my iced tea in anger. Go on. Ivana continues the story haltingly. The house they were driven to, Sanaya's home, was cluttered with children's toys. First lesson in housekeeping cleaning. Apparently, she was told to clean the scattered toys. Next is the shower room, and also the toilet. While Ivana was doing the work, Sanaya, claiming to be supervising her housekeeping skills, was spending time with Lloyd in the living room. Isn't this basically using your partner for menial tasks under the guise of visiting home? Doesn't it feel like harassment? When I pressed for more details, that's not all. Fresh tears streamed down from Ivana's eyes. They told me to make dinner for Sanaya's family of 4 plus the 2 of us, just using what was in the fridge. I've never cooked for 6 people before. I thought I would learn how to cook as we went along in our marriage. I couldn't even come up with a menu. Ivana's ordeal continued. So I found some eggplant in the fridge and tried to look up recipes on a cooking community website on my phone. Then Sanaya said, "You should be able to cook by eye. Using your phone is unacceptable." She took my phone away and said, "This is a failure. I'm going to need to give you some intensive training. We're changing all our vacation plans to stay at our house." The entire vacation? Even one day would be ridiculous, but the whole vacation. So, that was it. Apparently, she took back her phone and returned home, sobbing. What even is this? Ivana was really looking forward to their honeymoon. The hotel had a sparkling pool and a view of the beautiful ocean. They must have been excited to try poke balls and Hawaiian plate lunches. But Lloyd and Sanaya trampled over those dreams so easily. Then, Ivana, tears streaming down her face, brought up a suggestion. Interesting. Sounds like a plan. I decided to support Ivana with all my might. As soon as the honeymoon was over, Ivana received a call from Lloyd. We're coming over tomorrow to discuss how we're going to live from now on. When Ivana asked, "What do you mean by how we're going to live?" "You failed as Lloyd's partner, so we need to discuss what's next. Seth said you're a total failure in the kitchen. We need to talk specifics. Seth is coming with me. So listen carefully and think about where you went wrong." What? Reflect on my actions? I was about to explode with anger at that arrogant and unreasonable demand. But them coming over actually works in my favor. I decided to handle this calmly. Finally, the day of the confrontation arrived, and Sanaya and Lloyd showed up. "Well, Ivana, done any reflecting?" Lloyd starts off with arrogance right away. The serious demeanor he had during our first meeting seemed to have flown away. "For now, please, come in." I led the two of them into the living room. "Now, let's start the Ivana's partner test." I called out loudly for my husband, who was waiting in the other room. "All right." My husband walks in holding a yoga mat, a confident smile on his face. "Gotta keep in shape to protect the family. First, we're going to work on our core and back muscles." My husband has recently become concerned with aging and started going to the gym. With thrice weekly workouts guided by a personal trainer, he's got a solid chest, even at 60. "Alright, we're doing push-ups on this mat. It's a competition. Lower yourself down for 3 seconds, count slowly, and then push back up. That's 1 rep. If you don't stay down for 3 seconds, you won't engage your core muscles." Lloyd, who appears to have never worked out a day in his life, is utterly shocked. If you're saying Ivana needs a Lloyd's partner test, then I'm going to test if you're fit to be Ivana's partner. Keeping in shape is important for family support and child rearing too. Now, place your hands slightly wider than shoulder width apart and get into a push-up position. Come on, hurry up. It felt like boot camp, as if a merciless drill sergeant was waiting to put Lloyd through the ringer. Both my husband and Lloyd assume the push-up position. And 1. At that moment, Lloyd collapses onto the floor and can't get back up. He's stuck to the floor like a squashed frog. "Ha ha ha, you can do it. I can do 50, you know." My husband is breezily doing push-ups beside him. His glasses are askew, his tie is crooked. Lloyd remains collapsed. "Alright, you're next." I turned to Sanaya, who was standing there, dumbfounded. "What? Me too?" Now it's Sanaya's turn to be surprised. "You seem to be fond of my Ivana. I will be the judge of whether you have the ability as a mom and a wife, and whether you're fit to guide my Ivana." Yes, this was the retaliation plan that Ivana had suggested to me. Sanaya's home had mold growing in the shower, and her toys were just pushed to the side. She wasn't exactly in a position to teach me how to clean. Based on what Ivana told me, I had formulated a plan. Then, I forcefully pulled Sanaya into the living room. "I've lifted dirty just for you. This is your test. Now, start cleaning." Sanaya tried to deflect, saying, "I came here for discussion from Hawaii." "Huh? Didn't you make Ivana do chores under the guise of guidance and steal her leisure time? Well, I'm just returning the favor. Clean up quickly and call me when you're done. The next test awaits." I go back to the living room and make some good tea. I hand a cup to Ivana, who's quietly watching the plan unfold, and we both sit on the sofa. Meanwhile, Lloyd is struggling with his workout and getting berated by my husband. His neatly styled hair is now a mess. After a while, Sanaya returns to the living room. I've finished cleaning. Oh, that was quick, she says, peeking into the bathroom. It had taken her nearly an hour, so she must have done a decent job. At first glance, it looks clean, but there are clear traces of water streaks on the walls. If you don't wipe the water off shiny surfaces immediately, they'll get cloudy. Don't you even know that? Especially the mirror. It will get those white water stains. And you dare call yourself Ivana's mentor? I gave it to her, holding nothing back. Sanaya tried to make an excuse, saying, there's no mirror in my home shower room. Well, I've heard from Ivana, who cleaned your house, that there indeed was a mirror. I quickly shot back. And she said there was also a lot of black mold. Clearly, you've been neglecting it. Sanaya was left without a comeback, but I couldn't let her off the hook that easily. Alright, next up is sewing. Get to the sewing machine. What? Just as she thought she could relax after cleaning, another task was upon her. A sewing machine is a must, isn't it? I've heard your child is still small, but it's a given. I grinned as I picked up some leftover quilted fabric from when I made Ivana's lunch bag ages ago. Sanaya and I headed to the craft room upstairs. Peeking into the living room, I saw Lloyd was still getting a serious workout. He might even pull a muscle or something. You'll make a simple bag with this fabric? I've already done the cutting for you. Aren't I kind? A sewing machine, you say? You're not going to tell me you've never used one, are you? You can do all sorts of housework, right? I took Sanaya's hand and made her sit in front of the sewing machine. I don't know how to thread it. Sanaya looked down, clearly uncomfortable. Excuse me? So, about threading the machine. What? I can't thread it. I looked down at Sanaya, who was frozen in front of the sewing machine, and chuckled in disbelief. You claim to be a mentor, but you don't even know this. Ivana, come here. I called to Ivana downstairs. Coming! Ivana arrives. This lady here, she doesn't know the first thing about sewing. As I smirked, oh dear, Sanaya, like this. Ivana threaded the machine for her. Sanaya's face turned beet red, as if she couldn't bear the humiliation. Now, go ahead. Surrounded by the two of us, Sanaya started the sewing machine. Clatter, clatter, clatter. The stitching was all over the place. Pfft. I couldn't help but burst out laughing at her poor attempt. Ivana was also holding back a laugh, looking down. Some stitches were too deep, and others weren't aligned at all. Ivana, show her how it's done, will you? Sure, but usually you should do a securing stitch at the edge first. Well, it can't be helped, can it? She started sewing without any know-how. Our so-called leader here knows nothing. Ivana skillfully operated the sewing machine, stitching it straight. Having loved sewing from a young age and being in the sewing club through middle and high school, this was a piece of cake for Ivana. Watching that, Sanaya grumbled, "You can just pay someone at a craft store to sew a bag for you." Really? Then what's the difference between outsourcing your sewing to a craft store and replacing your lack of cooking skills with supermarket pre-made meals? There are things you can do that Ivana can't, and vice versa. Stop making excuses and picking and choosing to suit your convenience. I said just that and headed down to the living room. On the first floor, Lloyd was still sprawled on the floor.
It looked like he couldn't even get up anymore. Beside me, my husband was striking some sort of muscle pause. "Alright, let's have a talk. All of us." Still trembling with humiliation, Sanaya managed to take a seat on the sofa, along with Lloyd, who had somehow managed to get up. Ivana, my husband, and I sat across from them. "First, take a look at this." I laid out the sewing pieces from both Sanaya and Ivana on the table for everyone to see and compare. It's downright hilarious that someone who can only produce something this shoddy would act like they're in charge. Lloyd stared at his sister's wobbly stitching, completely stunned. That said it all. Sanaya was at loss for words, her hands trembling. "This one's a mess too. Unbelievable that they only had Ivana do the special training." This time, it was Dad who laid into Lloyd. "You've been going on about women, but we really have to question how you're doing as a man yourself," I added, driving the point home. Okay, this is probably a good place to stop. That's right, I remembered something Ivana and I had agreed upon that day. "Ivana, go ahead and bring it out." Ivana presented some documents. "It's not a quick divorce or anything, but I just can't go on with you anymore. I'm glad I realized it sooner rather than later." Ivana stated it firmly. "What?" Their voices of surprise came out in unison. Both widened their eyes, flustered and mouths moving, but no words coming out. "Hold on, I was thinking of forgiving you as long as you showed some remorse." Finally, Lloyd spoke up. "Sure, I can't cook, but that's not something I need to be sorry about. Devoting all our honeymoon to training and bringing in Sanaya, it's all just too absurd. I can't be with you anymore." Ivana started signing the papers with a pen. "Wait, so it's my fault that you're getting a divorce? All I did was point out your flaws." Now it was Sanaya's turn to panic. Ivana shook her head. "I never said I can't cook. I was planning on learning eventually. Besides," she paused for a moment, "just like I have things I can and cannot do, so does Sanaya. Judging that slowly based on your own convenience and standards is wrong," she said, setting the record straight. I went in for the kill too. "You can't even sew or clean, acting all high and mighty. Plus, you ruined the honeymoon and treated Ivana like a servant. I am too embarrassed to be related to you. Just sign the divorce papers and get out." And so, Ivana came back to our home. Sanaya got divorced because she was terrible at housekeeping. How dare she continuously harass Ivana, claiming to be some sort of mom or Lloyd's partner, without even considering her own flaws. This is what we call personal responsibility. Meanwhile, Lloyd kept making mistakes at work due to his inconsiderate personality. He even said something insensitive to a female coworker like, "These documents are a mess. Are you not in the mood to work just because you're feeling unwell?" He faced severe disciplinary action and was suspended from work. "Would you come back? If you reflect on this, I believe we can start over. And I feel like I could even get my position back at work." It seems like Ivana kept getting messages from Lloyd pressuring her to get back together, despite showing no signs of remorse. "That's not gonna happen. I'm getting married." With that, she promptly cut off communication. Yes, Ivana is set to remarry in 6 months. Her new partner is also a businessman, similar to before, but much more easygoing. He's into ab rolling and has a fit physique. As long as I can eat, I'm good. When they dine together, they get excited talking about things like protein for bodybuilding. Ivana, who's now seriously learning to cook, joins her in the kitchen. I mean, I could at least make scrambled eggs. While making sandwiches for work, Ivana recalls those days. "It's okay, don't worry about it. You'll get the hang of it as you go along." With that, I seasoned the dish just by eyeballing it.
My brother and I have been close since we were kids. Even after we became adults, until he got married, we often spent our weekends together. Years passed since he got married. One day, when I assumed he was living happily, I received a shocking message from him. "I'm being accused of an affair I know nothing about, and they're demanding compensation in the divorce court." It seemed that my sincere and earnest brother was being sued by his sister-in-law. I immediately headed to my brother's house. My name is Ava. I'm a 31-year-old woman working as a lawyer. After graduating from law school, I became a lawyer and now work at a prominent firm. I always struggled with studies, so it wasn't an easy journey to get where I am today. Still, I became a lawyer and now live a busy but fulfilling life. Of course, every day is a day of learning, and I think it'll always be. But I have a unique hobby: gaming. I'm what you call a gamer, and when I have time, I play online games with my brother, also a gamer. Samuel, my brother, who's 5 years older, supported me during my college admissions and bar exams. We're still very close. I was forming my career as a lawyer while enjoying games with Samuel. But since he got married last year, we played less frequently. One relaxed weekend at home, Samuel called. "Hey, do you have a moment? I need some advice." It was unusual for reliable Samuel to ask for guidance. Though surprised, I listened closely. "Lately, my wife's been acting strange. She's out often and sometimes doesn't come home at night. I hope I'm just overthinking." Samuel began talking about his wife, Charlotte. He said she often wasn't home when he returned from work, and sometimes didn't come home at all without notice. I only met Charlotte at their wedding, so I don't know her well. But from our few meetings, she seemed friendly. So I was taken aback. It's not inherently wrong to stay out late or go out, but if it happens too often, it's concerning. If there are relationship issues or infidelity, something has to be done. That's why Samuel consulted me, being a lawyer, about potential solutions. However, from a legal perspective, you can't do anything without evidence. Moreover, involving a lawyer isn't the most peaceful solution, especially without any proof against his wife. Since I didn't have a clear picture of the situation, I decided not to intervene just yet. "I totally get why you'd be anxious," I began, "but without more details, it's hard to say. There's a chance she might just be out having fun. If you really want to know, our office is partnered with a detective agency. I can introduce you if you like." Right now, there was little I could do. However, if Samuel was truly concerned, I thought it might be best for him to look into it. So I suggested he hires a detective. "A detective, huh?" Samuel mused. "That's an option. I'm swamped with work, so I can't investigate it myself. I'll think it over." Samuel's response was non-committal. Regardless, I sent the detective agency's details to Samuel's computer. "Let me know if you decide to hire them. I'll make the necessary arrangements from my end," I reassured. "Thanks." Samuel replied with a sigh and ended the call. His demeanor was notably downcast. The situation seemed even graver than I initially thought. Days turned into weeks, and Samuel neither contacted the detective nor reached out to me. Was he too busy, or had things settled down with Charlotte? Eventually, I decided to check in with him. "Samuel, how have you been? Any updates on the situation with Charlotte? It seems you haven't engaged the detective." I genuinely hoped Samuel's concerns were unfounded. However, from his tone, it was evident that things weren't great. "It's not resolved," he admitted gloomily. "I considered hiring the detective, but Charlotte manages our finances, my salary, everything. I can't afford the detective's fees." Samuel explained the situation in a somber tone. Despite feeling helpless, Charlotte's behavior hasn't changed, and it seems he's been living with anxiety for several months. "I get it. Hiring a detective can be pretty expensive." Samuel's allowance wouldn't nearly cover the investigation fees. Hearing Samuel's disheartened voice made me feel heavy-hearted as well. "All right, I'll help out. Let me see what I can do from here, so don't be too down, Samuel." I owed him big. I thought of this as an opportunity to repay a favor and told Samuel so. I wanted to alleviate Samuel's worries, even if just a little. I asked Samuel to wait a bit and ended the call for the day. A few weeks later, I stumbled upon some unsettling information about Charlotte. Before I could share it with Samuel, he called, sounding more frantic than ever. "Is everything okay?" "Something's come up," he blurted out. I braced myself for what Samuel would reveal next. "Charlotte is threatening to sue me for alimony based on false allegations of infidelity. She even has a lawyer demanding compensation for our pending divorce, claiming they'll proceed legally if I don't pay." It sounded like Samuel had been ambushed by Charlotte and her lawyer, with unexpected demands. He explained that he had secretly called me during a break from their intense discussion. Hearing this, I was at a loss for words. I knew Samuel wasn't the type to cheat. Samuel himself probably has no idea at all. That's why he's saying it's fabricated. So, Charlotte is claiming compensation in the divorce trial based on a non-existent affair story about Samuel. Samuel is genuinely a good person who is kind to everyone. Having seen many victims of scams and frauds at work, I was always worried about good-hearted Samuel. I often wondered if he might someday be deceived. But I never imagined this deception would come from his own spouse. So, what's the situation? What's the other side saying? I mean, Samuel isn't having an affair, so this claim seems far-fetched. Given that he had received a call in the middle of our conversation, it was uncertain when Samuel might be taken back. I needed to learn as much as possible about Samuel's situation in this brief time, so I quickly pressed Samuel for details. He shared that someone had snapped a photo of him during a business meeting with a female colleague, and now they were using it as proof of an affair. In the photo, both of them were dressed professionally, and the location wasn't suggestive in any way. It was clear they were forcibly trying to frame it as evidence of infidelity. There were a few things that struck me as odd at this point, specifically the approach of the opposing lawyer. A lawyer is a professional after all. They wouldn't do anything to harm their client's interests. If it's a case of infidelity, they'll do their utmost to reduce the compensation amount in a divorce trial if their client is the one having the affair. If their client is the victim, the lawyer's job is to claim the maximum compensation. But demanding compensation based on such flimsy evidence was highly suspicious. If they truly studied law, then they're a truly terrible lawyer. If such unreasonable demands were met, anyone could make wild compensation claims. There was no need to accept such an absurd request. As a family, I couldn't stand by and do nothing. "Samuel, I'm coming over right now. Don't answer anything they say until I get there. Just stay put and wait for me. I decided to step in as Samuel's lawyer and talk to Charlotte and her lawyer. From lounging in my casual clothes, I quickly changed into my suit, shifting into work mode. I called a taxi and headed to Samuel's house as fast as I could. Upon arrival, I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. It was Samuel who answered, and he welcomed me inside. Heading to the living room, I found Charlotte sitting next to an unfamiliar man. This man seemed to be Charlotte's attorney. Both of them looked at me in surprise. "Sister-in-law, it's been a while." I greeted Charlotte briefly and then introduced myself to the man beside her. "Nice to meet you. I'm Ava, an attorney. I'm here today representing Samuel." At my words, both Charlotte and her attorney looked shocked. "What? Ava? A lawyer? You're joking, right?" Charlotte mumbled, exchanging a quick glance with the man beside her. It's understandable that she was taken aback. She had no idea that I practiced law. I had been approached for free consultations and mentioned behind my back, leading to past troubles. As a result, I seldom share my profession with anyone other than close friends and family. Of course, that includes relatives too. Samuel understood my sentiments, so he never mentioned my job to Charlotte. That's probably why she was so surprised to see me step in as a lawyer. Charlotte controlled Samuel's income. He wouldn't have the means to hire a lawyer under normal circumstances. Perhaps she thought Samuel would be defenseless and took this opportunity to make her claims. Silently seated were Charlotte and her attorney. As I was pondering the next move, Charlotte's supposed lawyer spoke up. "I don't care if you're a lawyer or not. Your brother cheated. He should obviously pay compensation, right?" Beside him, Charlotte nodded in agreement. Did they genuinely believe they could win compensation in a divorce case with that? What do you have as evidence of this alleged affair? While I could never believe any tales of Samuel's infidelity, the two kept insisting even after I arrived. Wondering if they had any additional evidence beyond what Samuel shared with me, I pressed the opposing lawyer. "He was having dinner with another woman. That's solid proof. Let's say we'll let it slide for $50,000. You wouldn't want this getting out to family or his workplace, would you?" The man's words could be construed as a threat. I almost chuckled, demanding $50,000 based on such a flimsy accusation. Doesn't he realize how ridiculous he sounds? His bold claims only made me want to laugh more. By this point, my suspicions were nearly confirmed that this attorney might just be a fake. Despite being a so-called attorney, he had employed what seemed like threats against Samuel, something that had caught my attention from the start. I initially thought he might just be a corrupt lawyer, but even with a genuine attorney like me present, he kept making statements no real lawyer would utter. Claiming $50,000 compensation based on a mere public meeting is absurd. Just being in a suit in broad daylight in a public place doesn't prove infidelity. To prove adultery, there needs to be direct evidence of actual misconduct. Any attorney would know this. It's a fundamental aspect of the law. If he doesn't even know this, something's off. "I understand your concerns," I began, "but we can't just agree to the payment. Sir, could you provide your attorney license number and your full name? If you could also provide the name of your firm, I'll get in touch to set up another meeting." I pressed the opposing lawyer for his credentials. As expected, he began to falter. "I can't quite remember my license number right now. I must have forgotten. Please contact my wife for appointments." Forgetting one's own attorney license number? That's unimaginable for a real attorney. It's clear he's trying to deflect and quickly exit the situation. You can't say it, can you? Because you're not a real lawyer. I hit the nail on the head. I thought he would admit it now, but he defiantly countered.
What are you talking about? That's absurd. I could sue you for defamation.
If he could, I wished he would. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. If you're genuine, then tell me. A trustworthy attorney wouldn't hide their identity, and a real attorney wouldn't threaten to sue over such a minor issue. I replied with a smirk, leaving him speechless. The tables seemed to have turned. Both Charlotte and the imposter attorney looked defeated. Now, the ball was in my court. Mr. Fake Attorney, aren't you actually Logan, sister-in-law's former classmate? You work in sales, don't you? Hearing this, the two of them looked up in shock. Samuel, who had been quietly watching the exchange beside me, looked at me in surprise. You're not an attorney. Your sister-in-law's affair partner. It wasn't Samuel having the affair. It was you two, wasn't it? Am I right, Charlotte? Everyone in the room was taken aback by my revelations. The sudden appearance of an attorney who knew everything must have been startling. I had been consulted by Samuel, and after learning he couldn't afford to investigate, I took matters into my own hands. I couldn't stand seeing Samuel so distressed. An investigation revealed Charlotte's affair. I had been informed of every detail about the man she was seeing, including his identity. When I arrived at the house and saw Charlotte with the man next door, I was equally taken aback. Turns out, the man who claimed to be Charlotte's lawyer was actually her affair partner. I had done my homework. I let them know I had plenty of evidence of Charlotte's affair and reminded them that Charlotte and her partner would be the ones paying compensation. So, are you still planning to claim compensation from Samuel? Upon hearing my question, both Charlotte and Logan silently shook their heads. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. Please forgive me. Perhaps realizing she would be the one paying, Charlotte's tone shifted to remorseful and apologetic. Logan, seeing Charlotte's demeanor, gave a slight nod of his head. Charlotte then began to talk about the fake affair. It seemed Logan had expressed his wish to marry her, and she had felt the same way. They decided to fabricate an affair to push for the divorce. The idea of also getting compensation money seemed like a good plan to her. It baffles me how someone could think, let alone execute, such a plan. Then Samuel, who had been silent till now, spoke up.
You betray someone and try to frame them with a crime. You think just saying sorry will settle it? I've always trusted you as my wife, so be prepared for the consequences of what you have trampled upon.
Samuel spoke calmly, but with palpable anger towards Charlotte. He was right. A mere apology can't make up for such deceit. You might not be aware, but claiming to be a lawyer without a license is a serious crime. You could face jail time or a hefty fine. And Logan, you're implicated too. There's no escaping this. Upon hearing this, both of their faces turned pale. It seemed they hadn't anticipated the gravity of the situation. Charlotte, in a frantic tone, said, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I didn't know. I truly apologize. Logan quickly stood up from his chair and also began to deeply apologize.
I'm truly sorry. We didn't think it through. Please forgive us.
Their fervent apologies were a stark contrast to their earlier demands. It was a foolish display.
I don't care what happens to you two. I'm reporting this,
Samuel declared. It's often said that the kindest people have the fiercest anger. Samuel, without a second glance at the desperately apologizing duo, went on to make his report.
Wait, please! Just spare us that!
Ignoring their pleas, Samuel called the authorities. In the end, both were arrested. They eventually faced prison time. In the end, Samuel and his wife divorced, and the compensation from the divorce settlement offset any other financial matters. They agreed to have no future interactions. Charlotte was left without any defense, reduced to just tears. They tried to benefit by deceiving others and falsely accusing them. It was indeed a case of facing the consequences of their own actions. Regretting now is too late, but hopefully they would change for the better. After the divorce, Samuel seemed to have regained his old spirit. Ever since getting married, Samuel and I have been enjoying online gaming, something he had set aside for a while. After the whole divorce debacle with Charlotte, Samuel moved out of the room they shared and started anew in a different place, trying to shift his feelings and begin a fresh chapter. For a while, he seemed to have lost trust in people and kept his distance. But lately, I've noticed he's been slowly venturing out for meals with friends. Once Samuel feels a bit more settled, I'm thinking of introducing him to some of my trustworthy friends. More than anything, after all the hurt he's been through, I want Samuel to find happiness.